Because I believe most people are multidimensional at one point or another, and it's not just this life, this 3D reality, it's this dream that we can count among many incarnations, but other types of dimensional experiences too. Actually, I believe that we spend most of our time being dimensional creatures more than human ones, and then we do have a life cycle there too. We die and we come back, we show up here every now and then. And so at first I was getting a lot of those ones coming to the forefront of my awareness.
They came when you were doing psychedelics, or just as memories?
These ones weren't psychedelic influenced. They were just either memories, or beings would come in the astral plane and take me to familiar realms, and then my memory would start, coming back. And I remembered I'd be greeted by beings that looked like abstract two-dimensional concepts, triangles for heads. So I was very comfortable. I was in a perfect position for astral projection. It was the morning. I said, let's slide out of my body. So I used one of the techniques that I put together some time ago, free from anxiety, thankfully. I had to get over that. Mode of transportation. I slid out of my body. It didn't take long. And then I stood up. I remember it as if it was yesterday. I just simply spoke to the reality around me and told it to take me to the center of the earth, because every plane, even this one, is cognizant of your being here, and it will respond to you. I mean, in this one, there are a lot of religions built around it, which is pretty cool. And so, I mean, people would call it God. Sometimes people call it the universe. It's the mind behind everything, and it doesn't change when you get into another dimension. It's just another version of that mind there. And so I would tell it. I learned over time, you need to speak to this in order to get to certain places pretty fast. It's also a good idea to get to people pretty quickly.
Hey, this is mikesygula, and today I have an interview with a guy called Ryan Cropper, who is an expert on astral projection, out-of-body experiences, astral travel. So you can learn a lot about astral projection from Ryan, because he's one of the leading authorities in the world on this subject. He's been teaching hundreds of thousands of people over the last decade how to astral project, how to leave your body consciously, and what is possible when you do astral travel. And in this interview, he shares for the first time publicly how he was able to travel into middle of the earth. You're gonna hear him saying that and what he was able to see there, which probably confirms some of the other claims and accounts from different whistleblowers. Yes, these types of things are possible when you do astral travel. Basically, you can consciously leave your body in your astral body and travel the multiverse, do whatever you want to do. So Ryan is an expert on that, and he's gonna tell you a little bit more about it today. So hope you are excited. This is gonna be an interesting episode, definitely for open-minded people. And one time I had my own out-of-body experience, so I actually talk about it a little bit in this episode as well. And also, if you're gonna get excited about trying astral projection and astral travel, and you wanna learn how to do it properly, Ryan is actually selling online courses about it. So if you're gonna decide you wanna learn from the master himself, you can purchase one of his courses at ryancropper.com, and if you use the coupon code TruthTheory at checkout, you're gonna get 10% discount on his courses. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, this is Ryan Cropper. All right, this is mikesygula from TruthTheory.com, and this is Truth Theory Podcast. And my guest today is Ryan Cropper, who is a YouTuber, life coach, and spiritual teacher. Ryan is helping his viewers and clients to reach their full potential in spirituality and mental and physical health. His YouTube channel has over 15 million views, and you can find him on YouTube. Type in Ryan Cropper, is Cropper, or go to his website, ryancropper.com, where he's offering one-to-one coaching and also different online courses. So Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm excited. This is interesting. I always wonder what it's going to be like to talk to another person who has their own platform, because there's a certain way, certain style that every individual usually has. And so, yeah, I'm interested to see how this is going to go. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have unique vibe and style and interests. And I think, a lot of us just go in our own ways, for our own paths. And I would like to learn a little bit about your path, because from what I looked into, you had some interesting experiences which directed you towards where you are now, right? You had something like a near-death experience or something like that when you were.
Yeah.
This was a major thing, right? Which impacted like your whole spiritual journey. Like, I would like to know if you could summarize, like, how did you get to where you are now, and what was it like?
It's funny you say that. Someone brought it up last week, I think it was, and they asked me, if whether or not I'd be doing what I was doing today if that hadn't happened. And I was like, no. It really was a turning point. It basically brought me into spirituality, dying, and it uncovered a lot of things, a lot of suppressed things that I didn't realize I was experiencing when I was a kid. So basically, I grew up in a household that was very confusing. There's a lot of violence, a lot of anger, and I don't usually like making my dad, seem like the bad guy, but he had a lot of anger issues and he had a drinking problem. And so from the very moment that I was born, I didn't really connect to him that well. I remember crying when I was an infant because my mum had passed me over to him, and I didn't really like the smell of his fingers because he smoked a lot of cigarettes. It's a very vivid memory in my mind of that experience. And, at such a young age, as an infant, I kind of knew what things were before they were introduced to me, at this weird kind of knowing, like I was familiar with the world already. And later in life, I came to learn that I did know a lot about the world already, and that I just slowly forgot as I started learning the ways of the world, learning English, geography, history. The more I learned and the more wrapped up I got into things, the more I forgot. I think everyone, they're born with a certain sense about how reality is kind of made up, and the kind of story that they're born into, and this uncanny awareness about them. There's this movie called Mr. Nobody where, what's his name? Jared Leto. He's the lead singer of 30 Seconds to Mars. It's his own movie. He goes down. You see him in heaven. He goes down as baby, down like the portal, and he's told not to forget, essentially. And as he's born, he remembers everything, where he came from, and he has this similar level of awareness that I'm just assuming everyone has when they're born. And so it really resonated with my story in the beginning. And so my dad, yeah, I knew what he was about before really getting to know what he was about, And as the relationship progressed, I started having weird experiences within the home life. And it's connected to my dad, because when he left at age 13, a lot of things left with him. So you're having this weird, uncanny awareness about how reality is kind of set up, and the roles in which people play in life. It's kind of like being a little mini monk You can't speak. You start to see things. Spirits.
Sorry,
Yeah.
can I cut you off a little bit? I want to ask you two things here. So for example, I also had a lot of challenges, let's say, when I was growing up, and I did same like you. I don't like to criticize my parents or anything like that. But there was a lot of something I would call now pathological, let's say, all around me, like, different types of, I'm not going to be getting into details, but now after years, I can kind of see how pathological environment it was to grow up. And I feel like a lot of people who are becoming spiritual teachers, let's say, they choose these challenging lives. Like you go through a lot of challenges. So I think this is often the pattern, because it kind of helps you to understand and grow, right? When you have to overcome a lot of yourself, right? And then you become wiser and you can use that knowledge to help others. So I don't know. This is what I feel like happens to a lot of people like you and me. What do you think about it?
So basically, yeah, it's was shown to me by my guides before I was born. They kind of showed me how I was going to live my life, and then the issues I was going to have, the troubles I was going to have. And throughout my life, leading up to now, it's been a constant event after event has kind of proven this notion that we see our lives, we kind of review it before we're born, and we see the hardships. And you're right, it's you're supposed to go through these moments to shape you. They're supposed to make you stronger, more mature. They're supposed to make you more knowledgeable of the world and how to navigate in the world. If you want to be able to change the world and the people in it, you need to be a lot of steps ahead mentally. You need to have gone through almost everything that most people have gone through in order to empathize with them. A lot of times on Instagram stories, they'll say that people will never understand the violence that it took to be this kind. It's kind of like a saying that's floating around the circles over there on that platform, because there's some truth to it. There's an element of truth to it. Kind people were born from very dysfunctional situations, and it develops a certain depth of empathy within them that they can kind of bridge across to someone who's going through a similar situation. And so, yeah, unfortunately, but fortunately, a hard life tends to model very good, I guess, peers for people that are going through troubling times, and definitely not the exception.
Yeah, totally. Another thing is also that you had a lot of intuitive understanding of reality, right? Which you probably know it didn't come from learning it here, but from before, right? Because I had a lot of these. For example, I remember when I was 19, I just understood tarot cards without ever reading anything about them, or karma, or some kind of things like that seem very normal to me, like these types of subjects. And I had a lot of intuitive thoughts about spiritual topics, which it's almost like things seem familiar, right? You kind of know these things. You had a lot of these as well, right?
Yeah, so like I was saying earlier, when I was born, I kind of knew how everything was set up already. And it's just because I was told how things were set up already. It's kind of like before you incarnate, you're on the edge of reality, on the edge of a wormhole, when you're peeking through the looking glass and you're looking at Earth and you're looking at people, and you're told, you're schooled in the ways of the world that you're going to be born into. And so being born into the world, I knew how things were going to play out. I knew some really cool spiritual things that I ended up forgetting because I was learning the ways of the world. I was learning English. I was learning mathematics. I was learning social dynamics. I was getting caught up in a lot of drama as well, school drama, things that just didn't apply to me. Just nonsense really that just pulled me away from my natural state, which allowed me to kind of see things as they were. And it's been a kind of uphill struggle to constantly open myself up back into that old state. At one point, I believed I had it completely. And then I've slowly kind of, got caught up in the world again. But yeah, you're born knowing a lot about everything in the beginning. Well, at least I assume everyone is. I'd like to imagine everybody is. And that perhaps when they come across videos like this, it sounds familiar, it resonates to them because it's touching on a part of them that did know at one point in their life, how things were, the spiritual side of life, and even the more mental aspect of everything, of everyone else's psychology. But yeah.
Yeah, totally. Have you ever looked into your past lives? Do you know any techniques? I used to do it. I was very much interested in who I was before. So the things that worked for me was basically using psilocybin and tuning into my higher self. And then I was able to see myself in different bodies, different periods. And what I've learned about who I was before really made sense about my characteristics now, because who I am now is kind of a summary of what I've been doing before as well. So have you done any work trying to learn a little bit about who you were before this incarnation?
The initial phases were more so spontaneous happenings, being shown who I was, or having moments where I'm just remembering things. And these weren't so much past lives when it comes to human incarnations. They were more so experiences in other planes, because I believe most people are multidimensional at one point or another. And it's not just this life, it's 3D reality. It's this dream that we can count among many incarnations, but other types of dimensional experiences too. Actually, I believe that we spend most of our time being dimensional creatures more than human ones. And then we have a life cycle there too. We die and we come back, we show up here every now and then. And so at first I was getting a lot of those ones coming to the forefront of my awareness.
They came when you were doing psychedelics, or just as
these
memories?
These ones weren't psychedelic influenced. They were just either memories, or beings would come in the astral plane and take me to familiar realms, and then my memory would start, coming back. And I remembered I'd be greeted by beings that look like abstract two-dimensional concepts, triangles for heads, a long line, almost as if you're in Adobe Photoshop, just using that, that tool to create straight lines, flat shapes.
I've seen something like that. Triangular shaped beings, which are looking skinny or something like that. I don't remember. Maybe it was a Corey Good or someone who was talking about them. That's interesting.
I tried to mention the fact that they were straight. This is because I'm aware of that. They're different, very different types of beings, two-dimensional beings in this two-dimensional blank space. If you were to think of what perhaps a toddler would play with in their bedroom, very flat shapes, and then you make rudimentary humanoid beings that don't walk in three-dimensional space. They're 2D. So it's a very different space. I know what the one you were talking about with the triangle heads, yellow, and they look very much like beings that you can interact with. Yeah, they're more of the ET type encounters. But this was in the beginning. To answer your question about past lives on the physical realm, ayahuasca showed me those ones in some extreme detail. Different tribes that I belonged to, and a lot of them were women, which was cool. But yeah, they were all traumatic, because that's what ayahuasca does. It shows you traumas that you need to process, even ones that stem from a past life. I haven't been one to necessarily gravitate towards the concept of past lives, but they seem to just keep showing up. I guess ayahuasca, reality, the mental mind behind our universe, things to people they need to see it. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So let's go into like what happened when you were 16, right? Like this is when you had this experience?
Yeah, so like I said, I was born and I knew a lot about the world and I forgot about the world. And during this time, I had this figure in my life, my dad, who was quite dysfunctional. He had a drinking problem. And that's important because he triggers the onset of my awakening back into the reality of existence, you know. Because after forgetting everything about everything, 3 years later, I'm basically a normal person. I see ghosts every now and then, but I don't tend to pay attention to it. It's like a part of me still remembers, it still sees, if that makes sense. But the majority of that ability is shut down. That was up until my 16th birthday when we went to a quarry. Not because it was my birthday, but just because it so happened to be happening at the time amongst a group of friends. And as we get there, they're doing these, well, they're swimming out, these competitions. They're swimming out off into the quarry, throwing beers first, and then they go and swim out, grab them, come back. It's like a test of strength, you know, teenagers, they want to prove themselves to each other. And I'm a really weak swimmer at that point. I don't know how to swim. No one ever taught me. And I tried not to let that stop me. And the way that the quarry is built, it's built in such a way that you can swim past a certain point and then you can no longer see what's behind you. And it just so happened that what was behind my friends was me as they swam off to catch the beer can that they threw out. They no longer could see me because I was too far behind. There's this giant rock cliff face that was blocking their view. And then I drowned. If I was in disbelief at first, actually, I was like, there's no way this is happening. It's interesting, the train of thought you have when you're about to die, you really don't take it seriously because it's like impossible. You know, you really don't expect it. I think that's why it surprises a lot of people when they're in these types of situations, because I was pretty shocked when I realized that the senses were slowly disappearing one by one in the most painful ways. Yeah. Last one being sound. When I hit the bottom of the quarry, I could hear my body hitting the bottom of the quarry. And then just to save time, I won't describe what it's like to feel each one of those senses get kind of ripped away from you. I came to in a black space where I felt a being that was standing behind me, but I couldn't see him. And it was very apparent to me that there was a kind of like a line drawn in the sand, and that if I was to take one step forward, that's it. And he would say to me, you know, you could take one step forward and all your pain is gone. All of it. You don't have to experience any of it anymore. And you don't have to worry neither. I said, well, what about my parents? What about my mum? What about everyone? It's not fair if I die now. Age 16, they're going to spend the rest of their lives trying to deal with this. They said, don't worry about it. You know, it's in the plan, so to speak. They'll have support, they'll have comfort, and they'll see you afterwards. And so I was about to take a step forward, and then I saw memories, flashbacks of my dad in one of them, pretty large, poking me with his fingers to the ground and yelling at me and telling me how I'd never amount to anything, when my mum is forced to go upstairs. And it's a very clear, isolated experience that's burnt into my memory. And I think to myself, I want to prove him wrong. You know, I don't want to die and him be right, essentially. And then I saw another memory in all of this darkness. There were massive that they were being projected into the air of my girlfriend at the time. She had gone to the Caribbean a few days before I went out to this quarry, and I wanted to see her again. And I was like, yeah, I'd like to see her again. It'd be nice. And so I decided to stay, which was kind of crazy because I was really wanting to go. There was so much happening at that point in time that I really didn't want to be here. I'd actually ask for it every now and then. I'd pray for an accident to happen. I'm sure a lot of people have been there. And I felt like that drowning experience was kind of like God's way of saying, yeah, here you go. Here's what you want. It's fine. You know, here's a moment in time where you can finally be released from everything. But I went back on that kind of wish. And the next thing I know is I come to at the bottom of the quarry and I think I'm dead. I think I'm a ghost. And I'd recently watched a horror movie prior to that experience where people had died in water and they were stuck in the water because they died in water. So I say to myself, oh crap, I'm dead and I'm bound to this quarry forever. I'm just looking around. I feel like I can breathe, which is weird because moments before then, it felt like someone had a noose wrapped around my lungs and my heart. I felt like I could move my arms around, my fingers, which was weird because I was cramping moments ago. I say moments, so I have no clue how long I was down there for. So I kick off the floor and I just keep swimming until eventually I hit the surface of the water and all of a sudden I can feel my body and everything that is seared leading up to that drowning experience. It was horrible. And I doggy paddled my way to the cliff face. And it took me probably about 20 minutes to climb up the cliff. It's a short cliff, but after that ordeal, it was exhausting. And then I collapsed and threw up once I got to the top. My friend wanted to call the ambulance. I said, don't worry about it. I'm fine now. He was a little bit worried about brain damage. Others were like, where have you been? It's been ages. Like I was pale, like a ghost. Others didn't believe me that I just drowned and decided to laugh instead. You know, when you're 16, it's just how people are.
So you think that this experience helped you to understand that you live forever, that there is an afterlife, and it kind of triggered spiritual awakening properly?
No, I know. It's going to take much more than just drowning for me to come up to the surface and have all that intact. That happened afterwards. Because after I came back, I would lie in my bed and go to sleep and think, oh, that was weird. And then I'd have visions show up, images of my earlier days when I could see ghosts, when I could leave my body, when I was being shown things by entities. At first, I didn't know what I was seeing. They were just glimpses. But as the weeks went on, I started going through an awakening process where I started astral projecting by accident without realizing what it was. And then over time, I honed the ability. I reverse engineered it. All of the memories that were suppressed came back. All the ones that were suppressed because of my childhood and learning the ways of the world came back. And I built a system out of these memories to astral project on purpose, because when I was a kid, it was happening by accident. You know, so that was a very rigorous process that took some years.
All right. So before we're gonna jump into what's going on with your experiences with astral projection, I want to mention, actually, because my cousin, who is also someone who works for me, and I'm very close with him, he had a near-death experience one time where he overdosed some drugs. He basically mixed some drugs that he shouldn't. And he said he found himself in this black kind of space, void. And there was this intelligent voice speaking to him. You know, you're going to die, and do you want to stay or do you want to go? Your brain is overheating. And he said, because he had a very challenging life, at that moment he thought like, okay, I think I had enough. I want to go. And when he said that, he had a live review or something like that. He had basically like everything shown, what happened in his life so far. And the voice said, if you're going to go now, there are still a couple of things you have to finish in this life. You're going to have to repeat them in your next incarnation. So then he decided to stay. And the voice said, before you're going to come back to your body, there is still a couple of moments left. Is there anything you want to know? And he said, I want to know why my life looks the way it looks. And then he started learning about it. I don't think I want to go into it here, but he was shown some of the things he used to do in previous incarnations and things like that. But I think what you said about appearing in that black space and having someone behind you, guiding you and explaining, it kind of sounds a little bit what my cousin went through. I don't know.
Yeah, it's the same. It sounds like the same thing. Life reviews are part of your death process. There's a lot of people that will pass on, and they'll be shown key moments of their life that hold a certain amount of significance to them, to help them make decisions or to help them wake up to the impact that they had on others in their life. It's a part of their review. Sometimes it happens for a while. It depends. If they've passed on fully, and they've got a guide with them, their next stage is a complete life review. They'll go through every moment that they need to. If it's a near-death experience, you get a little taster just to help you make a decision, like whether or not you should stay or go. With astral projection, you can see a lot of people going through their life review, and they're very tormented, and that's why they're being shown usually.
Okay. Before you're gonna share your techniques and experiences with astral projection, I wanted to actually share my experience because I'm curious to hear what you think about it. So, I was never very deep into astral travel, but there was a period maybe 12 years ago, something, where I was interested. I remember reading Robert Monroe. I'm sure you're familiar with this guy. Some books, and I'm dyslexic, so I always had a lot of problems with focus, being focused, concentrating on something, having my mind focused on one thing. So when I was trying these techniques, one of the techniques I remember was that you wake up, let's say, in the middle of the night when it's going to be easy for you to fall asleep again within a couple of seconds or maybe a minute or something. And then you try to put your attention on some point and get yourself out. So that was kind of the technique that seemed to work for me. It took weeks before I was able to do anything. And I remember that I was reading that you either had like an out-of-body experience or lucid dreaming, or there was a third option, which I think they described as out-of-body experience in a dream. But maybe from what I watched from your videos, you were talking that, for example, astral projection and astral travel are quite different. So my experience was that I didn't see my body or anything, but I was floating. I could I saw like communication was telepathic. When I would interact with someone, I would find myself in my hometown and just float like a ghost. And I thought about something and I would find myself in that place and things like that. So what do you think it was? Was it out-of-body experience, astral travel?
Did you have a body?
No, I didn't see myself. And sometimes, like I remember seeing a bus stop that looked like it was twisted, reflected in a mirror, kind of the other way around than it would normally be. And I remember reading about 3 types of speed. One is like you float. The second one is like a train, like let's say 100 miles an hour, so you move fast. And the third one is that you think and you find yourself in a place you want to be. So This is what I experienced. That was the only time really that I remember. What do you think about it?
If you didn't see your hands, if you couldn't see your body at all,
No.
then that was astral travel.
Mhm.
If usually there are certain experiences that happen, symptoms rather, before you leave the body like that. One is, of course, staying aware the entire way through, so you never fall unconscious. The second, and this depends on your energy system. If you've done Qigong, Reiki, yoga, anything that has you tap into your energy system, it will be different for you. But usually, if you're a beginner, you'll experience the central channel activating in the body before you astral travel. That needs to happen. It's kind of like a tube that's in the body, and it's kind of like blowing a spitball through a straw. Your energy body revs itself up, and then you go into your body as a soul, and then it goes into this tube, and you get spat out through the top of your head as an orb. And that's usually what
Yeah.
happens to beginners. They'll hear a crack or a pop near their third eye or around the base of their skull. But again, if you've done Reiki or energy work, you might not experience the more harsh symptoms that happen before an astral travel experience.
Yeah, before I used to do Qigong and practice healing and things like that for a couple of years already before that experience. But it felt like I fell asleep and I just became conscious. It felt a little bit like that, you know?
Hmm.
But yeah, so what's the difference between astral projection and astral travel? Why they are different? Are
So,
you in the same space, same reality in the astral plane in both cases?
right. So the reason why I asked you if you could see your body is because with astral projection, you can. You see, with astral projection, you leave your physical body with your astral vehicle. So your consciousness just shifts into another vehicle, another type of vessel. It's an astral body. Native Americans call this the dream body. It's what your dreams are made out of.
And
And
you straight away appear on top of your physical body in the same room?
you're inside. See this. If you imagine being how you are now, and you're in your bed, and you keep your awareness aware, and perhaps you have a certain destination in mind. Maybe it's the etheric plane or a certain astral projection plane of existence, because they're a little different. As your body's falling asleep and you stay aware, your pineal gland actually sets you at the right frequency in order to make you materialize in this other plane. In this other plane, you have a bed. The things look the same, and so it feel like you haven't moved. You might have a feeling like you're someplace else, but essentially, let's say back here in 3D, I'm watching you astral project. You're now gone. Your body's in front of me, but you've just inside, you've dematerialized. Your astral body is now in another plane that's just above ours, you know? So it's not so much that you're on top of your body. You start off connected in the beginning, but then you go someplace else, and your pineal gland's making sure that you get to your destination. Usually it's thought responsive. Wherever you feel like you should go, you often end up going. Or it's based on your vibration. So based on how you think, feel, and your type of character will determine which plane you go to. If you do it at nighttime, you're most likely going to go to the one right next to ours, which is the etheric plane. And so there's a few places you can go, either as a default setting or because you set the intention beforehand. The difference between astral projection and astral travel is astral travel, your consciousness leaves your body, usually through a portal, either in the front of your forehead, the crown of the head, or maybe even out of the mouth. And you don't have your astral vehicle with you. You're just consciousness. You're just mind. Now, this has some benefits because you get to go to different places you couldn't go to before with your astral body. You also have a different lineup of abilities. You can merge your mind with other things, be that clouds, trees, and even people. You can go into their bodies, although I wouldn't recommend that. Yeah.
And you still go into that astral city or world, which is like a copy of this world. In both cases, is you can travel in the same space. It's just like, instead of traveling in your astral body, you just travel with your consciousness. Is that how it works?
You can visit most of the astral realms that you can visit with your astral body in an astral travel experience. However, you can't experience certain astral planes with your astral body. Or in other words, your astral body is limited. You can only go so far with your astral vehicle in hand. With the mind alone, you can go to many more places. But the mind can also go to the places that the astral body has access to. So when you astral travel, you have overall access. When you have an astral projection experience, you have a limited capability there. Does that make sense?
Okay. So tell us about your experiences, how it started after that accident.
So after coming back from drowning, I'm in my bed. Life hasn't gone any easier, actually. It actually got way worse. For other reasons I'll discuss some other time. But to keep it on topic with astral projection, I found myself one moment being in, well, actually, it's just, I started getting memories of seeing dogs walking through my sister's door, a ghost dog, different animals, cats. I'm seeing this man that used to walk back and forth in the hallway, very tall. He used to have to crouch to get into my room and other people's rooms. My mum later described who he was and knew exactly who he was, which was cool. And when I was a little older, he used to watch us. It was like a kind of guardian spirit. So I got memories resurfaced first. The memories came back of these supernatural encounters, and I was still I didn't know really what I was seeing. And then probably about a week in, I had my first astral projection experience. Again, I had no prior knowledge of astral projection. I didn't know what it was, didn't even know what it was called. And I found myself, after going to sleep, materializing at the foot of my bed. At first, I thought I was teleporting. I was really happy. One of the X-Men movies came out during that time, so I was like, oh man, I got superpowers. And although the excitement followed after the experience, during the experience, I was actually quite terrified because I got that ringing in the ear and I thought I was going to go deaf. I was looking at my hand, and 1 second it was there, the next second it wasn't. I looked like I was made out of static. I was very disorientated. I almost felt like throwing up, like vertigo. And as I got up from the foot of my bed, I noticed that there was a bright light outside my window. And so I followed it like a moth to a flame. On the way down my room, there's a mirror on the wall. I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes seemed to be shrinking to the size of raisins. They're very small. It's very uncomfortable. Next thing I know, I come back to my body. And again, I didn't know I just came back to my body. I thought I just materialized back into my bed because I honestly thought I was teleporting. The next day, I go to college and I say to my brother, you never guess what I did last night? I teleported. He didn't believe me at that point in time. We were living in 2 separate houses. He had a girlfriend, and so we met up in college and he didn't believe me. He didn't believe me for a while. I had to make DMT and give him an experience before he believed me about these things. After a while, I started remembering even more experiences that were very similar to what I had that night. And I was like, oh, maybe I was doing this when I was young. And so I can't remember how it came to me. I think I was looking up online superhuman abilities that people can actually do. Because at the time I was a little bit of a skeptic for most things. I didn't believe people straight away whenever they told me anything. I needed proof. Not physical proof. I'm not biased. Some skeptics only believe in solid reality. I'm more, if you can convince me, I will believe you. If you can put me through an experience, I'll believe you. So I had a decent amount of open-mindedness. I thought my approach to life was quite fair. It's funny, I later ended up experiencing fairies and dragons, all that cool stuff, which was weird for me to even imagine back then. But like you said, life kind of just gives you what you need. And so I end up looking online for these superhuman abilities that people can actually attain. And I come across a bunch of monks that could do some profound things, telekinesis, sitting in vats of oil without actually cooking alive, and mental powers. Mind makes sense to me. Perhaps you can reach abilities using your mind. And so I looked at all that. None of them sounded familiar to me at all, until this person who did pyrokinesis, he could set things like with his hand. He had a short interview on YouTube, and there's this one section where he talked about how you could use his chi to enter into other realms. I thought that was weird, but then I didn't pay any attention to it after that. It just kind of felt weird in that moment when he said that. Probably a few weeks later, I find a YouTube video about Professor Xavier, because now my algorithm is showing me so many different people with abilities. It's going into comic books, and it mentions his ability of astral projection, and it showed it, and then it showed Doctor Strange, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this looks way more like what's happening to me. Now I have this weird fascination with tearing things apart and figuring out how they work. I've always been like that. Even when I was a kid, I used to tear apart my mom's appliances, her hairdryer, anything she would throw away, her cassette tapes, and then I'd try to put it back together the way I found it. And I was the same with my mind, and this was like prime time to figure out what was really going on. Not only what was going on, but how can I do it on purpose? So I sat down with myself, and I realized that whenever I would recall moments of my past, my body can tell the difference between the present moment and my memory of the event. And so I'd get anxious when I remember seeing spirits. I'd get scared whenever I'd see something that wouldn't leave my bedside. And then I made the connection that after remembering these things, when I'd go to sleep, I'd end up astral projecting again. It's lighting up that same circuit. So what ensued after that was about 4 to 6 years of teaching myself memory regression. The memories are coming up anyway, might as well find out what's triggering them. What's mental state I have to be in to have them come up more. I came up with this whole process to bring back all my memories. And then I got to a place after a couple of years, actually, after a couple of years of thinking that it was a different ability and then finding out it was astral projection, I got to this place where I could spur along an astral projection experience. I was about 18, but too much anxiety because I was doing it through memory regression. It's like I was re-traumatizing my body all over again. That wasn't very useful. I didn't want to have to feel terrified every time I left my body. You see, I realized that the reason as to why I was leaving my body so much when I was younger wasn't just because I knew a lot about the world, because again, I wasn't doing this consciously, it was just randomly happening. But it was because my awareness was being forced outside of my body. When most people dream, they think and they imagine things, usually what they went through throughout the day, then they fall asleep. With me, I was terrified of my dad coming upstairs and then kicking open the door and beating me or yelling or what may have you. And so every night my door would be cracked open a little bit and I would go to sleep terrified, one eye on the door, and that would keep me aware as my body fell asleep. It also kept my awareness outside of my body and on that door frame.
Oh.
So this is why I bring him up quite a bit in the beginning. It's because he was also a catalyst to a lot of the experiences that I forgot.
Yeah, so interesting. Because on one hand, that was the technique, really, looking at the door and being scared. And on the other hand, maybe like these challenging experiences were for you to just learn and overcome. And I feel like we often, like, you know about the soul plan, right? That we apparently design up to 70% of important events in our lives before we incarnate. And the idea, if you want to evolve higher in the process of incarnation and go to higher planes, you have to gain wisdom and love. So apparently when you become your higher self, which is like late 7th density or something like that, then you are perfectly balanced with love and wisdom. So these challenging experiences, like going through difficult lives, allows you to gain a lot of wisdom. So this is apparently why like more advanced souls often decide to have like a mixture of challenges as well. I wanted to know, like, can you share maybe like the most interesting astral trip you ever had, like some kind of encounter or whatever you were doing?
I've ever had.
Or like one of the more interesting ones?
There's one that I haven't talked about yet. I've been meaning to put on my YouTube channel. It happened probably about 4 months ago now. Maybe 5 months. I wanted to, well, my audience has been telling me to look for the center of the earth, to see if I can get to the center of the earth. And I was like, I've never tried. I mean, I've tried other things. I've tried getting to the bottom of the ocean, but it's kind of terrifying. You don't realize how scary that is until you're free floating through darkness for a while. And so I was like, sure, I'll try this out. And so I leave my body at the time I'm sleeping on the floor, just because I find it easier. When you have a toddler in the bed, she tends to kick you quite a bit. And with work, I needed to make sure I got some sleep. And so I was very comfortable. I was in a perfect position for astral projection. It was the morning. I was like, let's slide out of my body. So I used one of the techniques that I put together some time ago, free from anxiety, thankfully. I had to get over that mode of transportation. I slid out of my body. It didn't take long. And then I stood up. I remember it as if it was yesterday. I just simply spoke to the reality around me and told it to take me to the center of the earth, because every plane, even this one, is cognizant of your being here, and it will respond to you. I mean, in this one, there are a lot of religions built around it, which is pretty cool. And so, I mean, people would call it God. Sometimes people call it the universe. It's the mind behind everything, and it doesn't change when you get into another dimension. It's just another version of that mind there. And so I would tell it. I learned over time, you need to speak to this in order to get to certain places pretty fast. It's also a good idea to get to people pretty quickly. You ever seen those TikTok videos where the camera moves like this, and then they move as well, and then they go into the floor, and then it comes up the other way, and they're in a different environment? The exact same thing happened. The exact same thing. I feel I was going to hit the floor. I was like, maybe not. This is the astral realm. And so I actually went through the floor, ended up coming up, free falling out of the sky, really fast, kind of spinning. And I had to take notes for the audience. What am I looking at? I was looking at the terrain. It's kind of like Dragon Ball Z, where they had the mountains with patches of grass on top. Only the mountains were much bigger. They were thicker. There were almost like mechanical lines etched into the mountains. These mountains were freaking enormous. It was weird. I feel like an ant in comparison. And yet these lines were miles thick. God knows how many miles, all the way up to the top of the mountain from the very ground, almost like a machine had flown out of there and destroyed it a little bit, marking the mountains on the way out of the atmosphere. As I'm falling, I see what I just described, and I also see a pyramid. And it's kind of like a jungle terrain. As I get down there, I'm looking at it. I notice the pyramid's been split into 3 parts, and they're separated, one on top of the other, by what look like giant cats. Now I'm thinking, wow, this is like Dragon Ball Z mixed with King Kong mixed with Wakanda, only I don't recognize the cats at all. I've never seen a species like this before. It's very weird. And so I float down to the top of the pyramid, and I notice this little kind of like a balcony region that's in there. It's open. And then I walk to another opening, kind of like a dumbwaiter, but it's about 5 foot in height. So 5 foot vertically speaking, and horizontally widthwise, we're looking at about 3 feet. And in there's a bunch of holes, because dumbwaiters are like little cabinets inside of a compartment of a wall. So this was a larger cabinet inside of a compartment of the pyramid, but it was made out of metal and it had holes in it like a grill. I looked into it and I could see inside of the top of the pyramid, and it felt very roomy, like someone was living there. I tried to get down to the bottom, but I ended up coming back to my body because I'd actually been spending that whole morning leaving my body in that particular experience. I was running on empty. And so that was one that a lot of people wanted insight on. I guess I can tell them that I spoke about it and direct them to this call.
So you saw a world like, I think it used to be called Agartha, something like that, potentially, like an inner world, inner earth plane, basically, where there is life and nature and everything, right?
Yes.
And these animals, they were like regular size?
Oh, no. They were monuments. They were carved out of the rock to separate the compartments of the pyramid, 3 of them.
So it's a little bit like in Egypt, basically. Something like these types of symbols.
A little bit more tribal, though. Yeah.
Wow.
Egypt has its architectural style. This was more jungle. Yeah. This pyramid was in the middle of like nowhere. There wasn't really much else around it. I didn't get a chance to really fly around the other side of the inner earth. And sometimes you get that.
Did you ever have some kind of negative beings trying to attack you during your trips or take advantage? Or I don't know, I had a lot of these when I was doing psychedelics, that I had interactions with positive and negative beings. And negative ones, they tried sometimes do tricks on me, like get me in some karmic contract, or do all sorts of things to disturb me. Have you ever had these types of things during your astral travels?
Oh yeah, there was this one time I left my body in the etheric plane, and I had this feeling that darkness was a substance. There was no such thing as an empty room, but the darkness was like a molecule that filled a space. I'm not sure where the feeling came from. It just, I don't know, it just kind of showed up. So I wanted to see. So when I was in the etheric plane and there was darkness everywhere, I shifted my third eye, because it has like settings like a camera. And I was able to see all the atoms in the air just by wanting to see what the darkness actually was. The intention to see it shifted my third eye into the setting so that I could actually see it. And I could see all these atoms that were perfectly placed, like a grid. It was just very intricate, very compact, like a bunch of molecules that you'd see on in a 3D model, for example, in a science class, with the blue and the red and the yellows. And I wanted to get a deeper look to see what it was. Are these atoms? And so just wanting to get a deeper look, that intention made me shrink, and I got really, really small. And I ended up slipping inside the nucleus of the atom itself, where I was not only greeted by different beings, but I ended up in a completely different reality that was much bigger than the one I came from. It was very bizarre. It's like a quantum reality. There, these orb-like beings, very bright, came up, and they showed me a portal through a floor. It was basically like a trap door. It wasn't physical looking. It didn't look like anything that we see here. It was more so just a rectangular portion of light that was coming out of an otherwise geometrical, sacred geometry dimension built out of these weird oscillating shapes and colors. And it said, hey, go down there. Go down there, you'll be fine. Both of them like, just go down there, you'll be fine. And then another being was like, actually, if you go down there, you'll never come back to your body. So don't listen to them. I was like, okay. So I jumped down a different one instead. And then I ended up coming out of a mound in another dimensional plane. I think it's wow. It was outside of time and space. There was no sense of time there. It was a perception of space, but it was very up in the air. I ended up coming out of a mound, a dirt mound, beautiful, luscious green mounds everywhere. Underneath the tree was a dinner table, just like Alice in Wonderland. And there were things made out of clothes that could speak, drinking tea, different animals, creatures, things with giant heads. And I was just sat there with them like, oh, wow, I guess this is real too. And so I've been there twice in my life. It's a very interesting plane of existence. It's right next to the fairy realm. So a lot of fairies actually come over there. And when they cross over to that plane of the astral dimensions, they end up taking on these strange forms where they look like children's toys that are animated. But if you go into their actual dimension, they don't look like that at all. Sometimes they look like moving crystals, moving energy, orbs, very different beings.
Mm. I heard that astral is fourth density, or sometimes they call it lower astral. So I don't know if you are familiar with this idea of how many densities there are. But basically, for example, I was shown on psychedelics 12 densities, which the way I was shown that I would jump into higher density for a moment, my perception would expand. So every time I was higher, I was seeing more details, and I could focus on everything at the same time. And then with each density, I would see even more and more and more and more. And I would just get like a review of everything going on there very fast, like different species, different worlds, different technologies, like very fast, like and then jump higher and finally I get to 9th density, which was very different. That was like an archangel level where there was nothing like before, different worlds. It was just like this heaven-like place with like massive pillars, golden symbols and things like that. And then there were some source levels, which I don't remember much about, but there was like a source in the form and had an assistant and things like that. And some people say that astral is in 4th density, because that's why we say we don't, we shift from 3rd to 5th density when we, go through ascension, because apparently 4th is just more like the end and the beginning. But at the same time, this is where the astral apparently is located. And some of these beings like fairies or gnomes or things like that. What do you think about it? Do you think these are like densities are different to astral?
Can you say that last bit again? It broke up a little bit.
Yeah, I was saying that a lot of people claim that 4th density or part of the 4th density is astral. Mm-hmm. That's why for example, they say we move from 3rd density to 5th density when we go through ascension. And 4th density is kind of the end and the beginning of a new cycle, right? Mm. And so it's in between, but also apparently at some levels of 4th density, this is where you have astral planes. Yeah. I don't know. What do you think about these things?
Yeah, that's definitely true. The 4th dimension is basically, and other dimensions related to it, or rather other aspects of that dimension. Because I remember in a video I described it as, can't tear up this piece of paper, but let's say this one. I described it as a piece of paper that was balled up. There we go. Yeah. There we go. So on this piece of paper, there's my camera's going to focus. There are contours, right? If this was Earth.
Yeah.
But it's one, let's say it's one plane of paper, so it's the fourth dimension. Each flat surface is a part or another realm that you can shift into in the astral plane, in the fourth dimension. So let's say the ethers is in the middle because it's the closest to ours. But then somewhere over here is that dimension I was talking about earlier with the little creepy orbs that wanted me to go through a wormhole. Over here is another one. Maybe it's something very similar to this dimension here. Maybe you're at an ayahuasca ceremony. Now you're in another ceremony, happening over in that dimension. This whole plane is time. It's time associated. So you can go forwards and backwards in that realm. So in astral dimensions, you can see the future or you can see the past. Usually they're mixtures of either or. For this reason, if you end up leaving your body, you can bump into people you've never met before, but you're going to meet them here. Or you're going to end up traversing locations that you have yet to experience. And then years down the line, you're here, you end up going to Bali, you're like, oh, I've been here in the astral plane, this is weird. Or you're meeting people there that, that you saw a decade ago in an astral projection experience. So I've noticed, the fourth dimension, and it's also what the fairies say is their dimension as well.
Yeah, that's what I heard as well, yeah.
Plane, of existence.
Yeah, I remember one time when I was in doing mushrooms in the forest, there were some like gnomes or something staring at us, me and my cousin. And I felt they were like, just like, what are these guys doing in this forest? We're taking mushrooms and having a ceremony. And I saw two beings just like looking at us there. And I heard a lot of these things that they say, sometimes even like Yeti are some kind of fourth dimensional species and things like that. So, I also wanted to know a little bit about like how you compare your experiences with psychedelics to your astral travels, because you also had a lot of experiences with psychedelics, right?
Yeah, I started taking psychedelics when I was like 21, I think. Up until that point, I just tried to do everything organically. I've only ever come across one psychedelic, one type of a psychedelic that has been close, if not the same as astral projection, and that's Colombian ayahuasca. Hey, it's the one that makes you crap your pants. And I didn't just think, I didn't draw that conclusion straight away. I had to ask other people too, what was your experience like? What was your experience like? I noticed that everyone there at the ceremony was talking about an astral projection experience. They all had that similarity between their stories. All the other ayahuascas that I've tried, they're not the same. Even other psychedelics, or as they've been known nowadays as plant medicines, like acid or mushrooms or San Pedro, they don't give me that level of interaction that an otherwise normal self-initiated astral projection would give me. I'm not saying that that doesn't mean, I'm not saying that means that psychedelics are inferior to astral projection, because they're not. They're great in other ways, and they can be just as intense in their own way and just as useful. But I have wondered, because I've heard a lot of people have tried over the years to reach an astral projection state by smoking weed, for example. That tends to have the opposite effect. You really need a lot of control of your energies in order to initiate an astral projection experience, and psychedelics tend to take you down their own rabbit hole for their own individual purposes, whether that's healing or, like healing from your life, things that have happened to you, traumas, or past life healing, or healing the world, or healing everyone else that's in that room. It takes you on a journey, and it decides how it looks and how it feels to quite a large extent. But hey, ayahuasca, it's different. And a lot of people will say that hey, ayahuasca doesn't exist, But if you ask a really old shaman, like an indigenous one that doesn't know English, they'll be like, oh yeah, we have that.
Yeah, and also the thing with psychedelics when you do these ceremonies is that you allow shaman to do the work, and the spirit of the plant or whoever is doing the thing. I feel like sometimes you are giving power to something else, and this might be not always in our benefit. Yeah.
Sorry, I just had to check to see if. Okay, go. Otherwise, in your benefit, did you say?
Yeah.
In what way?
Yeah, some because with psychedelics, when you do plant ceremonies,
Mm-hmm.
like the shaman runs the ceremony and they pray to some spirits, or they whatever it is, maybe it's a spirit of an ayahuasca, maybe someone else. So you allow them to run the ceremony, and in a way you give some of your power to them, because a lot of things are based on free will. So it's with the astral thing, you are fully responsible for what you do. You can maybe get some assistance, whatever, right? But with ceremonies, like sometimes the shaman might not work with the right guys. For example, I've seen ceremonies where shamans were very much hijacked, and they would work with the negative spirits, and then the people were affected who took part. So this is the thing, that you kind of give your power to someone who might be doing the beneficial thing, might not be, in a way, or ayahuasca or whatever it is, right? And with astral, it is you.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a certain amount of vulnerability that you can expect with certain experiences. I think this goes for any type of spiritual experience. It's the unknown. And when you put yourself in a situation where there's anywhere from 30 to 90 people around you, all on a psychoactive, so it's enhancing their mind, their psyche, but it's also opening up the energy centers. You're feeling what they're feeling. You're seeing things leave their body. You're seeing the entities that have been stalking them throughout their life. You're in a room with a lot of portals. The risk factor is really high there, and if you don't know how to take care of yourself, there can be some unfortunate circumstances that can take place. I remember at one ceremony I was bitten by a person that was next to me. It wasn't a small bite neither. He straight up attacked me. It took a lot of people to take him off me, because when someone's done something like that, they're very strong. And so I've had other people square up to me. Usually they're short people, I suppose. I'm 6'1". It's a psychoactive, so it also tends, like I said earlier, it gives you this amplification of your psyche. And I guess he needed to feel strong, so he was going up to every person that was tall and trying to square them down. And I was like, this guy's got a lot of adrenaline running through him, so I need one person behind him right now watching him. I don't feel safe. I can take care of myself, but try taking care of yourself when someone's on something. They're much stronger. And there's just one person behind him that looks smaller than him, which is an even bigger problem. It's like Russian dolls. The shaman is smaller than the person in front of me. And there's a risk factor there. This other guy showed up. He transformed right in front of me. It was freaking weird. Never seen that before. With the eyes, with my actual eyes, he looked like a completely different person when he came out off the bed. His eyes shone yellow like a cat. And his whole body like morphed. His muscles inflated. And he was very aggressive when he came out. He's kind of looked like this, like that.
After the session?
During is when everything hit its peak. And then he shifted into a little boy because he had some type of regression happen. One of the female shamans came out and it like triggered something in him. And his whole demeanor changed and he shrank. And he looked completely different again. People didn't feel safe when he ran out of that gazebo. So there's a level of risk to everything. I often say nowadays, if you're going to take ayahuasca, go to a smaller ceremony where you've got people that really know how to handle the medicine and the people on it, because it's a little mainstream at the moment. I don't think it's slowed down.
Yeah, I've had a lot of negative experiences as well. So I feel like people need to really watch out. Like, let me just tell you a quick story before we're gonna finish. I met this guy a couple of weeks ago at a festival, and he said he was doing a ceremony where the shaman was drinking alcohol, and kind of, when it kicked in, the shaman looked like maybe he had some negative beings around him. And obviously, if you drink alcohol, you're gonna have probably negative beings, especially if you're dealing with running a ceremony. So this guy that I met, he had an intention during the ceremony that he wanted to leave his corporate job and start living from music, right? Move into that. And then he said that a couple of months after the ceremony, he had a car accident. And because of that, he could not work, but he had a lot of time to focus on music. So, in a way, he manifested what he wanted during that ceremony, but it came in such a form that obviously was very negative. He said there was a very serious accident. And we started connecting these things together when he told me the story. And I feel like, in my view, 100% the shaman was hijacked somehow by the negative beings. And, they kind of basically, this is what happened. That's why he ended up in this scenario. So that's why I always say, like, people need to be really careful with plant medicines, because there's a lot of dangers involved. And like you said, it's kind of becoming a little mainstream now, and everyone feels like, yeah, it's just, let's go have fun and whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're on juice fast? That's the difference.
No. Why?
Because moments ago you poured up a drink that was yellow, and now
Yeah,
it's
no,
crystal clear.
this is like electrolytes, the yellow one. Yeah, I have 2 drinks. Yeah.
Cool.
Is there anything else you would like to add to our conversation?
No, that's it. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right. So, like, how can people get in touch with you, and what type of services do you offer? Because I know you do coaching one-on-one, and you have some online courses as well.
Yeah, so I've made my online courses very affordable, very readily available to anyone. You can watch videos on your phone, you can watch them on your computer, on a tablet. It's entirely up to you. And to get in touch with me, you can do it through my website. I have a separate messenger just for my website. It's like a little widget that shows up. You click on that, and a separate chat comes up for me, and I'll get your messages straight away. Whatever questions you'd like answers, I can answer them for you. But please keep them short. I get a little crowded sometimes with requests. And if you'd like to book a call to get further insight on your questions, perhaps you need to learn something, or you need to help with something that you're going through at the moment, you can do so simply by booking one of the services on my website. Same website. You'll see them. All the pictures are AI generated, so they're pretty cool. And you click on it, it will show you my availability and when you can book. You'll get an email the day before our call. It'll give you a link to our room, and then I'll meet you there. We can record it if you want. You can keep that afterwards. And yeah, if you'd like to stay in touch, you can. I can guide you a little bit more depending on what you're going through. But again, keep the messages short, because I do get a lot. And if I don't respond straight away, I'm not ignoring you, I promise. It's just there's just a long queue.
And if people want to learn more about how to astral project, what's the best? What you can recommend to them?
The best way to learn is there's actually quite a few ways. If you want the meat and potatoes, the stuff that I finished with, because remember I was talking about how I had years where I tinkered with exercises, and I reverse engineered my ability. The final thing I landed with was a 10-step conditioning process that conditions the physical body into the astral projection state permanently. So you're constantly aware of your astral body, and you constantly feel that you can slide out. For this reason, you don't need a method anymore. You can just lie down, feel into it, and slide out. That's on my website. There's also a starter kit for beginners that are struggling with their mind. A lot of people get frustrated with astral projection. A lot of them quit before real progress is made, because I don't think they realize how subtle of an energy astral projection is. And if you get a little bit frustrated, if you fall into sleep like, it didn't work, it can throw your whole energy body out of order, and then astral projection becomes impossible for that session. You need to stop and start again. So I have a starter kit there that specifically goes into the mentality you need in order to achieve an astral projection. And so there's those two there. I've also got it's like an audio you could use. It's just a quick meditation. If you don't want to watch the videos, you can just listen to it. It's a separate meditation from the videos that work on the psychology and the conditioning process. This one's more, you take these speakers, stereo speakers, you put them in either corner of your room, you press play, it'll be on your phone, and it will sound like I'm in your room. You have your eyes closed, and I'll be guiding you from one corner of the room to another. I'll walk up close to you. It will really feel immersive. And I'm basically getting your awareness outside of your body, the same way that my awareness was taken out of my body by my dad coming up the stairs, only with kindness and love. So you'll feel very much guided out of body. And then you go to sleep, and then boom, you slide out. It really doesn't train you to keep your mind outside of the body. Setting up that astral projection experience, that sliding out aspect of it all. So those are for astral projection. I've also got a YouTube channel. If you feel like you need something a little simpler, maybe can't quite afford the courses, although they are always on sale, they're quite affordable, but let's say money is an issue, I have a whole playlist dedicated towards how to astral project. Within that playlist, you'll find tips and tricks. You'll also find other versions of the astral projection techniques that I put together over the years, freely available to anyone that's interested.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. Thanks a lot for sharing.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys. Till next time.